What's up guys, patch 7.1 just released, so I want to go over some of the new additions. Big features include the revamped Carrison Dungeon, which has 9 bosses. Now, it's worth noting the old version is still there, including the old mount. I think it's great that they've finally updated something and they didn't take out the old version. I wish things like Nax Ramus and the Troll Dungeons hadn't been removed as well. The new Carrison requires an attunement, which mostly involves mythic dungeons, and I'm not totally sure how I feel about that. Attunements in general have tended to be either too long and tedious, or so quick and easy that they didn't really have a point. I guess we'll see how it works out. The loot in Carrison ranges from item level 855 to 860, with 875 dropping off the final boss. I think that's a pretty fair item level overall, similar to lower level Mythic Plus dungeons and around Heroic Emerald Nightmare. The most interesting items in the dungeon are the Wine-Stained Mantle and the Amulet of the Last Guardian, which form an item set, and the set bonus increases damage and healing done by 10% when you kill a dungeon boss. While I'm glad to see dungeon set bonuses return, although a full armor set would have been cooler than just 2 items, I think that set bonus seems really strong, and it might end up being required for Mythic Plus runs. Carrison also drops 2 mounts in this patch. The updated Huntsman boss drops a new version of Midnight, which, I've gotta say, even though it is just a recolor of a PvP mount, looks really nice. It doesn't really resemble the old Vampire Horse much, though. And the other new mount is an updated version of Nightbane, which previously didn't drop a mount, although people always wanted him to. The other big thing added is Trial of Valor, the 3-boss raid featuring Odin and Helya. The raid doesn't actually activate this week, it opens 2 weeks from now, and I think this is probably to keep the focus on Carrison, and because a lot of people aren't done with Emerald Nightmare yet. It seems like Blizzard is really trying to avoid pushing out raid content too quickly in an effort to avoid leaving us with a drought at the end, which I think is a pretty smart move on their part. One of the new additions that wasn't heavily promoted is the new Quick Join feature, which lets you join your friends that are already queued up for something, like a dungeon or a battleground. I don't really think it's that big of a deal, but it is very convenient not to have to leave the queue if a friend wants to join you. I generally like anything that smooths out the multiplayer experience. I'm just surprised this wasn't added sooner. I guess it does take a while to implement these things, seeing as we're still waiting on that appear offline feature after 4 years. Next up, we have some significant changes to PvP. The most notable is that honor talents are no longer lost when you prestige. So previously you would level up through the honor system and unlock the various talents, then when you prestige you drop back to level 1 and lose all of them. I've always felt that that's kind of the whole point of the prestige thing. You get a cool badge, maybe a mount or like an artifact skin, and of course some bragging rights, but ultimately you pay the price of losing everything you unlocked. In any case, Brian Halenka went to the forums to explain why they made this change. He said that they wanted prestiging to be a form of extended progression, something that would keep PvP players engaged with the game. It was always intended to be both optional and, of course, prestigious. You're supposed to be impressed that someone would actually reach a high prestige rank. But the bottom line is that losing your honor talents just didn't feel very good. Losing out on the talent options ended up feeling like more of a punishment. So the way it works now is you'll just have to level up to level 50 once to get all the talents, and prestiging resets your level, but not your talents. So prestiging basically loses all of the downsides, but the honor system should be more fun and rewarding overall. I think it's a pretty good change. I mean, I saw a lot of feedback encouraging them to do this for a while now. I do wonder why prestiging works so well in other games like Call of Duty, but not as well in WoW. I think that's because in WoW, as any RPG, people get really invested in increasing their character's power and unlocking new abilities and having more options, and losing them for any reason just feels more punishing than in something like an FPS. Also in PvP news, they've upgraded the Nagrand Arena with a nice visual update. There aren't any gameplay or layout changes, just an update using Warlord's assets and textures. Considering it's one of the most popular arenas, I think it's good that they didn't actually change anything. I wish they'd do this with older battlegrounds like Warsong Gulch. Overall, it's good to see any PvP updates. I think a lot of the PvP community has felt left out or abandoned because they haven't really had any new battlegrounds or arenas or new content. Moving on to open world content, the Suramar campaign continues. Much like in patch 5.1 or the Garrison questline, you'll be getting weekly quests over the course of 9 weeks, and the final reward is the new Arcanus Mana Saber mount. It reminds me a lot of the Mystic Rune Saber store mount, although I've gotta say I actually like this new one a lot more. I think it perfectly captures the Suramar and Nightfallen aesthetic, which I absolutely love. There are also a ton of world quests being added, mostly relating to Helya. I'm just glad they're continuously adding new quests into the system to keep it fresh. One of the nice little additions are the new Falcasaur mounts. These are the sort of raptorish mounts that you raise from hatchlings over the course of a questline until they're big enough to become a full-fledged mount. Basically, it's another take on the whole Winter Spring Frost Saber or Venomite Ravasaur thing. I really like the basic idea of it, although I think making the reward just another variant on the raptor is kind of lame. I think they're okay mounts. I don't know if anyone's gonna say, oh, those are my absolute favorite mounts, but I do like a couple of the color variations. Last up, we have the new Raiding with Leashes achievement. They're finally adding pets to some of the Wrath raids, including Ulduar, Trial of the Crusader, and Icecrown Citadel. You've got a nice celestial rabbit, a little Merogar, a small version of Mimron's tank, and a Yogg-Saron tentacle. I've always liked these little achievements. They just give you another reason to go back and visit old raids besides Transmog. I was always wondering what they would do with Ulduar. I mean, there's just so many bosses there. I think I was actually expecting a few more pets, not just one or two. There are, of course, a ton of other minor changes in this patch, including the ability to finally hide your belt, improved auction house sorting, and the ability for fire mages to hide those flame orbs, but most of them are a little bit too esoteric to cover in this video. Overall, patch 7.1 seems like a pretty great addition to the game, if for no other reason than its release has come so quickly after Legion launched. The amount of content seems pretty comparable to other major patches like 6.2, and considerably bigger than the smaller ones like 5.1 or 5.3, and it's definitely better than that non-patch of 6.1. I hope we continue to see quick and big patches like this. It really seems like Blizzard is committed to actually supporting this expansion, and WoW in general. Anyway, that brings me to the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.